Hello, everybody. Welcome along to the return of the Rangers Academy review. This takes me back to memories of travelling to Dumbarton and interviewing David McCallum and the players and getting some player interviews, which we're hoping to do again. And we're hoping that we can bring that back. And hopefully, we'll have a wee update very near in the future to let you all know about that. Now, just so everybody knows, sometimes these will be live, other
Yeah.
times just due, which is not easy for me to say, to scheduling, we'll have to pre-record them. So we are recording this on Monday the 28th, and this will be out on public YouTube on Thursday. So if anything happens in the Panathinaikos game midweek that changes the discussion that we're going to have here, I do apologise. But like I say, recorded on the Monday, just so that everybody knows. And of course, I would not be able to do this myself, and I would not be able to do this if it was not for one Sir William of Irwin. Willie, how are you?
Aye, good mate. Another fun day at work. So we get to talk about something else other than work at some point.
Yes, we absolutely should. And I actually think, and by the way, folks, underneath the video, or if you're listening back on the audio platforms, in the comment section, get your questions in. I'll get them to Willie, and he will do his best to absolutely answer them all for you. Willie, I don't think we can really begin any other place than Finley Curtis
Yeah.
and Bailey Rice. Obviously, they've made their way from the academy into the first team. And we'll keep this short, obviously, because we don't want to make this a first team pod. How impressed have you been with young Finley?
Yeah, incredible, really. I thought, obviously, over the summer he would get away and worked hard, which is what you can expect for Finley, to be honest. But to come back and actually basically be one of the mainstays of the first team has been very impressive. Obviously, early on, he was one of the few that was playing 90 minutes, while most were playing 45. He's obviously carried on his form into the games. Obviously, massive goal in the Bruges game, just for confidence as much as anything else. And then, obviously, the first goal against Panathinaikos, that's key to us going on to win the game. And then he comes off the bench against Middlesbrough and scores the equaliser. And this is very much who Finley is. You know, he's a kid that finds his way into the penalty box and scores goals. He has a real knack of doing it. You know, it's no surprise to people that have watched him that he's capable of getting goals. He just, as I say, has this incredible ability to be in the right place at the right time. And when he's in these positions more than often, he seems to find a way of putting the ball in the back of the net, which he's done really well so far.
Even when I'm recording, I still leave myself on mute. There we go. And look, well, he's had his battles in the past at academy level. You know, for a long time, he was quite small,
Yeah.
obviously quite thin. Physicality was an issue for him. And then he had that one summer where he just kind of sprouted
Mm.
and got himself bigger. But it's not as if it's not been all plain sailing for Finley.
No, it's not been, and he's one of those guys that, you know, like a lot of players, you know, he's probably done it the kind of more difficult route. You know, he's had to get around a few kind of bends and come back to the straight and narrow again, and it's not been a straightforward journey for him. And I think in some ways that's a good thing for a player because it shows that he's got a lot of mental strength and he can come through a bit of adversity at times. And I think that's where kind of Finley gets that hunger for him. You know, I think sometimes maybe people tell him he's not good enough or he's not big enough or he's not strong enough or he's not going to get a pro contract. And all these things just seem to have really pushed him on. And, you know, the fact that a manager like sort of Russell Martin is taking such a huge liking to Finley, you know, it can only be a good thing for the future. And obviously right now Finley's probably as high in confidence as he ever has been as a professional footballer. Just the fact that he's in and around the Rangers first team and he's scoring goals for the first team for the team that he grew up supporting, and it must just be the most unreal feeling for him and his family.
Absolutely, absolutely. And me and you spoke to his brother and his dad, and
Yeah.
we've had many. And you've had a lot more, obviously, conversations with them than I have. And it's just one of those absolutely phenomenal achievements. But Wally, what it also does is it gives that glimmer of hope to anybody else in this academy that look, there's a high probability you don't make it, right? But that's not just Rangers; that's every football club, right?
Yeah.
There's a high probability you don't make it, but if you apply yourself and you do have the quality, just look at what Finley's doing.
Yeah, of course. And look, some players are lucky in that maybe they have this natural God-given ability where they can just kind of walk into the first team and not look out of place. So I watched a bit of the Arsenal game yesterday. The young lad, I think he's 15 years old, strolling on the pitch, absolutely dominating a game of football, and you just don't see that very often. I mean, Billy Gilmour's probably the only one that I've ever seen do it. Just has that level so early on in his career. Most young players have to work extremely hard to just get a sniff of the first team. Never mind actually like sort of playing it on a consistent basis. It's not an easy thing to do at any level of the game. And clearly at Rangers and Celtic, there's much more pressure. There's much more expectation. If you can't hit that level every single time, there's going to be criticism. People will say you're not good enough. And that's where I think the best always try to find their way to the top, isn't it? And at the moment, Finley's on the crest of a wave, and he just needs to keep working and keep developing his game, because at the end of the day, Rangers will continue to sign players and they will continue to spend money, and it's up to Finley to show the manager and all the other players that he's the best person to select in that starting 11.
Well, from Finley to Bailey,
Yeah,
it's not been. It doesn't appear to be. We don't know what's going on in the background, right? It could just be Russell Martin's taking a wee bit more time with Bailey, bedding him into the team a wee bit smoother. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but from the outside looking in, well, then again, we've had conversations with Bailey's dad at some of the games, and we know that during the close season there, he was away, he was training, he was putting extra shifts in to come back this season. He really wants to make a push for that first team. It would appear from where we're sitting that it's not quite going the way that Bailey had hoped already.
no, I think you're right. I think there's probably a slight tinge of disappointment there. I think at the weekend it was a tough first half. I mean, Connor Barron really struggled in the first half to really get control of the middle of the park. But look, as I've said to a couple of other people, we're playing a totally different style of football now. It's not easy for players just to stroll into that team and dominate. I think we seen that in the first half against Panathinaikos. Like sort of Raskin and Diamandi in particular really struggled in that first half. We couldn't get our foot in the ball. We couldn't get control of the game. We get much better as the game went on, and it might just be that more game time's required. But the problem being at this time of the season is there's not really time to do that very often when you've got so many big games coming up one after another. My gut instinct at the moment with Bailey is he might have to go out and loan, and that's purely just to get minutes. Whether it's one of those loan deals, it's maybe just until January, and if he gets his 15, 20 games, Rangers might look to recall him and then utilise him in the second half of the season. But I think for Bailey, the most important thing is that he keeps playing football and that he keeps, looking to develop and improve.
I mean, there's been rumours kicking about, which I'm quite happy for me and you to both quash. There's been rumours kicking about that his attitude's not right, that he's not giving his all, that he's not doing this, that he's not doing that. And Wally, you know him.
Yeah.
You know his family. You know that is the biggest load of nonsense you've ever heard.
Yeah, look, I think, as I said before, I think sometimes Bailey's. I know a lot of people are into body language and stuff like that, and they think, but that's Des Bailey. He's quite a chilled out kid. He always looks kind of quite relaxed and things, but certainly nothing to do with his football ability. He's got a great range of passing. He can put his foot on the ball. He never really seems to be under any pressure. I just think a lot of what Bailey does is very good. But potentially the biggest problem that Bailey's had is he's just not played enough first team football. And that potentially is that Rangers need to now get him out and get him those minutes. And we'll obviously touch on some other players after this that probably do need that next step in their career, which is to go out on loan and it is to play more men's football, because at the end of the day, even if they don't have a future at Rangers, some of these players that we're about to talk about, it helps them on their career path to taking that next step. Because not every player's going to, go from the academy into the first team. Everybody's realistic about that. There is only a very small amount make it. However, there's nothing to stop these guys playing in the Scottish Championship or the Scottish League One and playing 30, 40 games and then start to move up the ladder like a few players have already done since leaving Rangers.
100%. 100%. One of those players, Robbie Fraser. Well, he's somebody who I thought might might have had an outside chance of possibly being in and around the first team squad, maybe getting some minutes. I was always under the impression, of course, that Jeffrey or Yilmaz was going to leave, probably naively. And I've said this on loads of shows and I will continue to say it. Naively, my bias maybe took over. And I was maybe overthinking it a wee bit and thinking, well, could we go with Yefty and Fraser this season, or would that be too much of an ask for that left back spot? What do you think the future holds for young Robbie Fraser?
Well, I think at the moment you would have to say it looks like it's going to be away from Rangers. Early the pre-season, any of the training videos either. So you would have to say it does look like his future is going to be away from Rangers. He's in the last year of his contract as well. So, yeah, it looks like Robbie will probably move on this summer on a permanent deal. I would like to think Rangers might put some type of buyback clause in that, as well as sell-on clauses to make sure that they're protected should Robbie go on and become the player that many people think he can become. So, yeah, it's never nice to see good young players leave the football club, but on this occasion it very much is to the benefit of Robbie, because if he goes and keeps playing football, in my opinion, Robbie's only going to get better and better and better.
And on that same kind of tact, Clinton Insiala, obviously involved with the first team a little bit last season, also involved with the academy. I don't see, after what's obviously been said by the first team manager, I don't see him playing much for the academy this season. I don't see the value in it for him, Willie. And if he's not going to be involved with the academy, he'll be gone as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a pretty brutal environment, isn't it, when you talk about it like that? You know, we're still talking about a young kid that has played very little first team football. I mean, that is the brutal parts of it. You know, we signed him at the start of last season. He hadn't played first team football. He obviously played some games at the academy where he did struggle at times. You know, we can't hide behind that. He did struggle in some games. He was obviously sent off against Queen's Park, which was really disappointing on a night that we actually probably had a good chance to get through. He ended up getting a chance in the first team due to injuries, where he did reasonably well to start off with, but then things took a bit of a turn against St Mirren and Kilmarnock, and then he never really get back in after that. And obviously Russell Martin's decided that, you know, he's not going to have a future at the club. The difference with somebody like Enciala is he's on a reasonably long-term contract. So I'm wondering if Rangers are maybe thinking, let's put him out on loan for a year, see how he does. If he does really well, they can bring him back. If not, there's a possibility that if he does well on loan, Rangers could then sell him for a potentially higher fee than what they would get for him now. So yeah, it's a slightly different situation to Robbie Fraser, but at the moment, it seems like Clinton's on the outside and he's not going to be part of the first team squad as it currently stands.
On a more positive note,
Yep.
I think we should mention Mason Munn. I think Dunfermline, Willie, is a fantastic loan move for him.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant for Mason. You know, to go out on loan for the first time and it's in the Scottish Championship. It's very rare that a player will go straight into the Prem and go out on loan at that level. So to be the level below that in a team that I think will be looking to push for that, you know, playoff berth this year in the Championship. And he's obviously, not everybody's got to like the manager at Dunfermline, you know, we're not silly about that. But the one thing that you know you're going to get from the Dunfermline manager is that he's going to be demanding. He's going to demand the high standards. And if the players aren't doing that, including Mason Munn, then he'll find himself out of the team. So to me, that's the right kind of manager that young players need. They need a demanding manager, somebody that's going to push them, that's going to make them the best they can be. And for Mason, it's a great loan. Hopefully he gets 30, 40 games this season. Hopefully he really pushes on in his development as a player. Still only young, you know, like 19 years old. It's a really good time for a goalkeeper to go out and, you know, to look at his game, to see what he can work on. Does he need to work on his shot stopping? Does he need to look at, you know, the ball at his feet? Can he do more with that? Can he come off his line quick enough? Is he good enough to come in, you know, like sort of command that penalty area from set pieces? And as a young goalkeeper, until you go out and actually play that, you know, play within that environment, you're never really going to know, because it isn't the same as playing academy football. It never will be. You know, when you go up for that first cross and somebody elbows you in the face or leaves a wee bit on you, that's when you know that it matters. It's when you know that you're now in a competitive environment, and that players will do whatever they can to try and get the better of you. And if they think they can bully you a wee bit or leave a little bit on you or maybe say things to you, this is where you learn a lot about yourself, and where Rangers will learn a lot about Mason as well. But I think Mason's got a real chance, a bit like Ryder Maguire. I think we're very lucky to have two really talented young goalkeepers coming through the academy right now.
And I don't think it's necessarily make or break for Mason at Dunfermline. It's an opportunity, Willie. It's a massive, massive opportunity for him to be able to show what he can do. It's not quite make or break. Like you say, he's still very young, especially for a goalkeeper. But he is a young player who you've spoke to me quite a lot about. And look, you can be the greatest young player in the academy at a young age, and then it just doesn't work out for you, right? So nothing's set in stone, right?
No.
I'm not sitting here saying that anything's set in stone, but he is somebody who you've spoke to me a lot about, and a young player who you think, if it goes the way that it could go for him, has got a big future.
Yeah, look, Mason has a lot of those raw attributes that you look for in a goalkeeper. He's already got that size. I mean, when he walks by you in the training ground, you kind of look up at him. He's a big guy. He's physically very big as well. He's already well built for a guy his age. I think he's improved a lot over the last 12 months. I mean, as I said earlier, I think Murg is very fortunate with Mason that the club managed to get him on a long-term deal very early on. I think he's on like a 4-year deal now. So the club have kind of protected themselves with that. So even if this loan doesn't go well, there's still an opportunity for another one. It's not like we're putting excess pressure on Mason to go out and all of a sudden be a superstar. I'm sure Mason will think he can go and do well, which I think he will. But, there's not that excessive pressure on him from Rangers thinking one good loan you're going to come back and be the first choice goalkeeper. That's not how it's going to be. But the good thing for Mason is he's got people that he can talk to. He's got Jack Butland there, who's a very experienced goalkeeper. He's got Liam Kelly there as well. And I'm sure these guys will pass on, advice to him if he requires it over the course of the season while he's out on loan.
Alfie Halliwell as well, Albion Rovers.
Brilliant, mate. Yeah, look, I think for Alfie, it was very important because this season, when you look at the squads, we are a bit heavy on goalkeeping. You look at like the 19s, you're going to have Sam Reid, Greg Thackeray, and Ryder Maguire. And if Alfie had hung about, that's 4 goalkeepers for one position. It was unrealistic to think we could have those guys there. I would imagine Ryder will now step up and train with the first team with Mason been out on loan. So, yet again, that's more good experience for Ryder. For Alfie, people will say, well, maybe Albion Rovers isn't, a great level for Alfie. But all that matters right now for Alfie is he's out playing men's football. And he's going to get that experience and that knowledge. At the end of the day, we've sent Robbie McCrory out on loan to League 2. Then I think like Robbie played League 1, etc. So most goalkeepers do tend to go up the levels at a slower rate. Mason's kind of jumped in there quite quickly and went to a good level in the Championship. But that doesn't mean that Alfie's a League 2 or a lowering league goalkeeper. It's just that for him right now, there's a team out there that's willing to put him in goals and play him week in, week out. And that is going to be absolutely fantastic for Alfie. You can get, again, a young goalkeeper last year that was unfortunate, picked up a couple of injuries, kind of dropped out of the squad because of that. Obviously, Ryden ended up taking that spot, and then Ryden ended up having an absolutely fantastic season, And at times, I think, obviously, we've spoke about it because of your brother. Sometimes you get forgotten about quite quickly when you're out injured. And I think in Alfie's case, that's potentially what happened to him a little bit. Not like due to the fact he's a poor goalkeeper. It's just sometimes when people don't see you for a while, they forget who you are. So like for Alfie to come back, obviously get some minutes at the end of last season, he's obviously come back this summer. They've managed to get him out on loan where he's going to play most weeks, if not every week. And that can only be a good thing for, the next step in his career, which is to obviously just keep pushing on.
I think it's important, Willie, that we discuss on this, because I would love to go on and speak about Josh Gentles and Callum Burnside and try and get people familiar with the names that we're probably going to be speaking about a lot throughout the season. There's plenty of time to do that. What I think we should finish the show with, though, is how the academy is structured this
Yeah,
season, how it's moving forward. There's a lot of people, I think, who are a bit confused about, well, what league are we playing in? Is there a B team? Is there not a B team? What's happening with the reserves? This and that. So from my from me looking at it, right, as somebody who's nowhere near as in the know as you with regards to the youth, the B team scrapped, right?
yeah,
Are are Rangers? So a few questions. Are Rangers the only one to do this? Is B team football in Scotland slowly dying? And what happens then? And I know this is quite a lot to take in the one, right? But what
yeah.
happens then if you, for example, turn 20 and Rangers feel that there's, you might have a future, but we can't find you alone. There's no B team. What happens next?
Yeah, I mean, it is quite brutal when you say it like that, to be honest, because, I mean, it is the truth. I think Rangers felt that the B team best versus best games wasn't working. Under previous managers, they clearly felt that playing in the Lowland League wasn't where the players were going to develop enough to end up playing in the first team. So they looked at obviously these best versus best games. And I think at the start, it seemed to work okay because we had a slightly better quality of opposition. But as the season started to go on and on and on, it felt like the standard of the games we were having weren't particularly great. And I don't think it really benefited the players. And then obviously last season, basically halfway through the year, they just scrapped it and they sent everybody out on loan. There was like nobody left to play. And obviously there's been a slight restructuring at the academy as well. The in Scotland it's went from under 16s and under 18s to under 17s and under 19s. So officially, Rangers B, as it will be known, will play in the Challenge Cup this year. But it's mainly going to be the under 19 squad, maybe with one or two who might drop in and play because I think you're allowed a couple of overage players in it as well. So there still is that flexibility for players that might need minutes. However, I think it was the right decision. But, and it's tough to say that because a lot of guys have now left the football club and they're still without clubs, which is quite brutal just because in the Scottish game there's not a lot of money and that maybe only so many players can get contracts. But it felt like there wasn't enough for the B team to be kept together because they weren't getting the competitive action that they required. It probably wasn't pushing the players enough. And then after a while, because of the gaps between the games, some games it was like a month between games, and that's no use for any young player. So at the end of last year, Rangers basically decided enough's enough, and they basically done away with it. Celtic, to an extent, done away with a lot of players as well. Celtic let a lot of players go this summer. It looks as though they're going to play a slightly younger team this year in the Lowland League, a bit like what Hearts have done in previous years as well. And it's probably meaning that they're going to be slightly less competitive, you could say, in terms of challenging for that league, even though they can't obviously get promoted out of it. But it's probably seeing it from the other point of view that maybe if you play 16 and 17-year-olds at that level, they might gain more out of it rather than an 18 or 19-year-old would. Because at that point, you're probably looking to already be out on loan at a higher level than the Lowland League. And obviously, over the summer, as some people will have now seen online, you can now have an agreement. If you're a top flight club, you can have an agreement with League Two, League One, and the Championship. So you can send players out on loan, and these players can still come back and play for the under 19s as well, which is really good if they're not playing at the weekend. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this season works out. But I think in the end, it probably was the right decision by the club to disband the B team. There probably wasn't enough there for the players. There probably wasn't the right standard of games. And in all honesty, they probably did keep some players maybe that extra year longer than what they should have done, and they should have been out playing men's football maybe long before then.
Just to make up the numbers, I suppose. Which is harsh to say for any young player. But if you're holding on to players because you need to play in a certain league once a month, then like you say, that's just more detrimental to the actual young players than playing under 19s football, for example. And that leads me on to my final question for you, Wally. The way that it's set up now, under 19s, under 17s, is it going to be easier? harder or stay the same for these young players to catch the manager's eye, get in and around the first team squad, and possibly get into that first team? Because I don't know how many times me and you have had the conversations, everybody online's had the conversations. Rangers and Celtic are a different breed of club in terms of bringing through young players because we have to win. We have to win cups. We have to win leagues. It's maybe slightly harder for young players to make it at us than it is for a Hibs or a Hearts or a Dundee United or whatever. So with the new setup and how it's running, just obviously very early days, it's hard. You're not a mind reader. How's it going to be for these young players trying to make it at the club?
Yeah,
as the ice cream van comes past.
I know it's 2 seconds. I'll mute it for a second because the guy goes on forever, by the way. But no, look, I think in all seriousness, I think it's one of those ones where it's going to be difficult. It is going to be difficult because at the end of the day, if you're an under 17 player, you're probably only 15 or 16 year old. So unless you're being the best player in the country, you're probably not going to be training with the first team. Mm-hmm. For the under 19s, I think they'll send out some of the best players on loan. So I think some guys will go out on loan as part of this sort of cooperation agreement that's in place. And I think we'll be slightly younger this year within the under 19s. I think you'll find we'll have a lot of 17-year-olds playing in those games, and some of the 18s will probably head out on loan because it's the right thing for them to be out pushing themselves at men's football. So I would imagine guys like Blaine McClure will probably go out on loan, maybe a Callum Burnside, Chris Eddy, Callum Adamson. I would have thought those type of guys are probably pushing to go out on loan and play again because it's the next step in their kind of evolution as a footballer to try and push on to become first team players. But I think we'll find out more in the next couple of weeks. I think we will gradually see things happening. There's a chance that maybe one or two other players kind of leave the football club as well. The club are obviously still interested in maybe bringing in some more players too. There's obviously been some links that we've obviously kind of passed to each other via WhatsApp and stuff like that. So the club obviously haven't stopped looking, but it's trying to bring in a better standard of player to the academy than what's already there. And I think that's something that Craig Mulholland did quite well. That summer that we added Archie Stevens and Zach Lovelace, that made the academy stronger. Obviously, we added Bailey Rice, that made the academy stronger. There's no doubt that the addition of Ryder Maguire made the academy stronger. It's like Kyle Glasgow coming in from Hearts made the academy stronger. So it's a continuation of looking to bring in. I mean, it'll be interesting. Obviously, in the coming weeks, we're going to see probably more of Zeb. Obviously, signing off with Brighton. I think he's still getting up to that fitness level where the club, sort of feel he should be at before he's going to play. I would imagine we'll probably see him not too long in the future, maybe in the next couple of weeks. So, yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done, mate. And this is why we're doing this academy review, because it's just to let people know there's a lot going on. There's a lot still to be changed, in my opinion. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a process over the course of maybe the next 6 to 12 months, where there might be some changes within the staff, some changes at the top of the academy, some changes within, the players as well, where some players might move on at the end of the season. Maybe the club feel like they can bring in better players. It's something that, as a whole club, for all the first teams taking a lot of the, the pressure at the moment, it's important that the academy steps up as well, because a club the size of Rangers, the money that Rangers are putting into the academy, we do need to see more progression from young players into the first team, and then obviously the value grows. Because at the end of the day, if Finley Curtis can do well for Rangers, there's a better value on him. If Bailey Rice can do something for Rangers, there's better value on him. And further down the line, if you can make 3 million, 5 million, 7 million on these players, it's money that's been well spent on the academy because they've broke through, they've made an impact in the first team, and then we've been able to sell them for a really good profit.
And we'll finish up there, but I think it's also, we need to give Colin Stewart and the guys at the RYDC a mention for all the incredible work that they've done and all the mega amounts of money that they've raised for the Rangers youth development. I think without them, I don't think the academy is as strong as what it is. Hopefully, they're not relied on as heavily now with the new investors, new owners, and it'll be interesting to see how seriously the new owners come in and take the academy. But that's something that we'll discuss on future episodes. We'll also go into a bit more in depth about who's running the academy. David McCallum's in there as interim now. We'll go through some individual players in a bit more detail. But I think it's right to do that, Wally, once the season starts.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt that over the coming months we will see maybe wee gradual changes at the academy. Maybe more will come out from the football club. And it's a good thing because there is no doubt that over the last couple of years, the academy hasn't been where it should be. And there's been too much that's not been achieved during that time. And some of the teams haven't been good enough. I mean, that's been brutally honest about it. That Rangers under-18 team should have won the league last year. With the players that was there, we should have won the league. It was disappointing that we ended up losing out to a Hibs team that in the end deserved to win it. But, the players that Rangers had in that squad last year, that team should have been more than good enough to be a league winner. And I think that's something that, as a club, that was a failing last year from us because it wasn't good enough. And obviously, the B team, I think it's fair to say that over the last 2 years, the B team didn't really work. It just wasn't enough to help young players get better. I don't think the continued change of the first team manager helped, but that's not an excuse because at the end of the day, Rangers are putting a lot of money into the academy, whether it's players' wages, staffing wages, the cost of having the training ground, the upkeep of the grass. I mean, all the pitches have all been reseeded again there, so that comes at a huge cost. You've obviously got all the staff that work up there that maintain the pitches and the training facility in general. So, yeah, look, it is important that players make the breakthrough because, see, at the end of the day, the argument on social media can always be, well, let's just shut the academy and put that 5, 6, 10, 15 million pounds to better use over the course of 3-5 years. And at times it's hard to argue that because when you see like sort of the lack of players being given that opportunity and the money that's being invested, we should be seeing more from the academy. There can't be any dispute about that. And, hopefully Russell Martin's the sort of guy that will give a young player a chance if he feels like they are good enough to make that step up.
I think he's kind of shown that he is that kind of manager. Wally, mate, pleasure as always. I'm glad that these shows are back. I've missed them, and I look forward to doing these more often throughout the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Martin said at the start of the podcast, guys, if there is any questions at all, stick them in the comments. Martin can forward them on to me. And also, if it's coming from members in particular, what I can maybe do is a little 5-minute segment where also I can answer those questions privately. And then Martin can obviously put that out on the members' pods. If there's anything that just comes from the normal putting it out on YouTube, yet again, we can pick up on that in the next pod. Some of them are going to be live. It's just, unfortunately, at the moment, I'm quite busy with work. Martin's obviously doing a lot with the pod, sometimes 3 podcasts a day and things. So we will try and make as many of them live as is humanly possible. But because of the nature of the first team, not knowing when we're playing some weeks, if we drop into the Europa League, it changes the schedule. And so, yeah, like, things will probably just need to move kind of ad hoc when we need to. But, yeah, obviously, any comments, we'll definitely get back to you. And then just appreciate all the kind comments that we got in the past and all the stuff that we're hoping to have in the future as well.
I do have one question for you, actually. It was left for Timothy Sharp on our latest podcast that you done. When does Bailey? When does Finley Curtis's contract expire?
I'm pretty sure Finley still has 2 years, so it's not the end of this season; it's the one after. I'm pretty sure. So Finley's got a bit, but I would imagine yet again, without kind of getting into like a 5-minute talk about it, I would imagine if Finley keeps doing what he's doing, Rangers will probably look to give him a pay increase and extend his contract, a bit like they did with Ross McCausland. So, yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's not at the end of this season; it'll be the end of next. But I would imagine, yet again, I don't imagine it will take long for Rangers to sit down with Finley and probably give him an improved contract and probably extend it as well.
This is how the conversation will go. Finley, we want to offer you a new contract. Yes. Right, well, we haven't told you how much yet. Yes. That's how that conversation will go. That's how.
No, look, it's at the end of the day, Finley is at the club that he's always dreamed of playing at. You know, he's living the dream that, you know, we all wanted to. So, you know, you can only be happy for any young player that gets to live that moment, that dream, whether it's at Rangers or any other club. Because I think, as you know and I know, it's not easy. It's not easy to make that first team breakthrough.
No, it's certainly not easy to make that first team breakthrough at 36, Willie, let me tell you. It's not easy. It's not
Yeah, we're
easy.
not going to talk about your career, mate. We know that's kind of way over the hill at this point, and I'm definitely way over the hill in terms of trying to play football. But no, look, in terms of the academy, hopefully there's better things to come in the next 12, 18, 24 months. And hopefully, you know, we do see more and more players make that breakthrough into the manager's first team. And that's what we all want to see. We want to see guys that care about the club playing for the first team.